Okay, in this lecture we're going to learn how to use the text tool. And this is a very involved tool. There are a million things you can do with it. And for somebody who wants to be a graphic designer where you're doing business cards, advertisements, posters, etc., you're going to use the text tool a ton. So I would be remiss if I did not show you at least a solid introduction of how to use it. So first of all, I'm going to get rid of this text that I have here. I'm just going to hide this layer. So we just have our basic background layer, and we'll start adding some text from scratch. The text tool is located right over here. It's the T, and fortunately the shortcut is T. So when we're out in the middle of our image panel, we can just press the T key and you'll see a different little cursor comes up. And to add text to an image, you just left click on the image somewhere. This lorem ipsum placeholder text is new. It used to just give you a cursor. So if you're in an older version of Photoshop, if I remember right, you'll just have a cursor, which was actually better in my opinion, but that's okay. If this is here and it's highlighted, you could just start to type. So I'll just type in how to use the text tool. Okay, and before we get too far, let's talk about a few things that are happening. You'll first notice that it started typing in blue. The reason that it did that is because I have the color blue selected up here. Remember how this is the options bar. Whatever tool you're selected in over here is going to give you its own option bar up here. The text tool is no different. One of the most important features is the color. So when you click on this, it brings up a color picker and you can select various colors. Let's just say we want it to go to red. It'll show you the current color, which is blue, and it'll show you the new color that you've selected. I'm gonna get a better red, not that maroon. There we go, that's a little better. If I click OK, it's going to change the color that I'm using. Now you'll notice when I click OK, it didn't change the text. The reason is because I've already typed that text in blue, and now my cursor is over here. But if I continue typing, just throwing in some letters here, then it's going to make those letters the color that I've selected. Okay? I'm just going to hit the backspace key to go back. Now if I want this to be all red, then I'm going to have to select that. So first you make sure you have your text tool selected. That's one thing that you'll notice gets confusing, because if I go to the move tool and I'm doing something else and then I want to go in and edit this text, it's very important that you reselect the text tool or press the T key so that you have the cursor, and then I can highlight all of this or select all of this text. You can do it by clicking and dragging. You can do it by double clicking for one word, triple clicking for everything, or you can click into here and right click and say select all to select all of your text, and then you go back into the color picker, select the color that you want, and this is even previewing it for me, so as I move around here I can see how it looks on my screen, kind of like that dark color. So let's just go with that. We go ahead and click OK, and now it's changed it, but it has this weird purple around it and blue text. The reason for that is because when it's highlighted, it shows you basically like the inverse of the colors. Before anything will be finalized, you have to go here and accept the changes with this little check mark. It's sort of like when you use the transform controls to stretch or shrink an image, you have to go confirm your changes. So you click here to confirm it, and now that text is officially read. Okay, it's worth noting that when I created this text layer by clicking with the text tool, it created its own new text layer, and it names it according to what you type. You can of course change this by double clicking here to make it more relevant, but that's usually pretty helpful. And then if I'm selected on something else like the background and I want to get back to my text, then I just click on the text, and if you want to put your cursor right in there, then double click on it and it'll highlight the entire text, and then you're right in there and ready to work. Keep in mind, if you wanted to add text to the end, you'd have to click your cursor at the end. If I hit enter, it'll take me to a new line. And let's just put in a couple of filler things here so I have a couple of rows of text so I can show you some examples. Okay, we've done our typing. Now I'm going to, of course, accept the changes. Click check. If you don't want to do that, you can click on the don't accept changes and it will revert back to what you had before. But we do want to keep it, so we click the check mark. Now we have some rows of text here, and we can change the way it's justified. Right now it's left justified. We can center it, so now all the text is lined up down the middle, or we can right justify it, so it's all lined up down the right. Now this is pushing my text around, which is okay. I'm just showing you the example. But centered, left justified. We could go with centered, and then we could actually move this back into the center by hitting V or the move tool right there. And then we can grab our text and pull it into the center. If you watch the little pink guides, as I move toward the center, it'll snap to that pink guide, see it in the center, and it'll kind of hold it to that center line. It's a great way to center your text. Then we release the mouse to let it stay. One thing that trips a lot of people up is if we go back to our text tool by hitting the T key, and I go over here, or sometimes you might be even close to this, and you click the text tool. My intention was to click into this and edit it more, but I accidentally created a new text box. Because remember, that's how we originally created this text, was by just clicking with the text tool. And you'll notice it's also created a new layer. If that was a mistake and you didn't want to do that, you can either just grab this layer and delete it, drag it and delete it, or you can just hit the reject button up here and that will go away. In order to get back into this text, you have to make sure you're right on the text and click into it. If you're too far outside of the range, it will create its own new text box. So make sure you're hovering right over the text to click into it, and then you're ready to edit your text again. If we wanted to make this a headline and make it bigger, we can highlight that by clicking and dragging, and then we can go to our option menu again and you'll see some more options. The most obvious one is the size of the text here. This is the little text size icon, and you can use this drop down to change it to a bigger size. You can also change the font type, and you have tons of options here. And the nice thing is, on newer versions with CC, as you hover over them, it automatically shows you a preview, and you can just cruise through those. So let's go with something small so I don't extend past my background. Let's just go with this. And then oftentimes you'll have options here. You can go with regular, condensed, italic, bold, etc. So we'll call this one bold. Oh, except that made it too big, so now we need to probably reduce our font size just a little bit. Let's say you want a font size between 36 and 48. You can either just click here and type it in, like say I want 44. You have to hit enter to make it actually go into effect. It doesn't do a regular preview. Or you can hover your cursor over this text tool and click on it and then drag, and it will go in 1 point increments, which is kind of nice. And then again, when you're ready to confirm those changes, click on the confirm button. Before I do that though, I'm going to go ahead and go down here and delete all these just by hitting the delete key. And then I'm going to show you how to distort the text a little bit, which is kind of fun. You go into here and just click on that, and it has a warp text box. We'll just move that into a convenient spot. And the first thing you'll see is your style. So you click the drop down and you have all these different shapes that you can distort your text into. Probably the simplest and most straightforward is just an arc. Notice it just immediately blew it off the screen into a big arc, and that's okay. We'll fix that a little bit. You can change the percentage by which it's being bent, And notice how it still stays in the text tool shape. It doesn't go to a pointer, and that's fine. You just can still use it. You click, and then it becomes a pointer, and then you just distort it or undistort it to reduce the bend, something like that. And then you can change the horizontal and vertical distortion as well. I'll just show you what this looks like. So it stretches it on one end or the other end. We'll put that back to 0. You can also just go here and type 0. And then the vertical distortion looks like this. So it stretches the bottom, or it compresses the top. As you go this way, it stretches the top. Okay, so we'll leave this one at 0 as well, and just use the bending to distort it. You can also do a negative bend, so it swoops like that. But we'll go back to just a little bit of an arc. And one thing to notice, if you want a bigger arch and you're going to go like this, and for now it's off the screen, right? That's okay. You can just select OK. And then you go back in here, 3 clicks to get it selected, and then you can reduce the size of your font a little bit to make it fit. And then confirm your selection or your changes. And then you go back to your Move tool by hitting the V key, and you can just, of course, make sure you're still selected on the text, and then you can just grab it and drag it, or you can use the arrow keys, pushing down with the arrows or up with the arrows. If you hold the Shift key, it'll jump. I think it jumps 10 pixels at a time, so you can do a little quicker, or you can hold the key down and it'll jump a whole bunch. So those are good ways to move it a little bit more precisely. And then one more group of tools that you can use to edit your text is the character panel over here. And I'm going to just left click and drag that out here and plop it right here so it's a little easier to see. And this gives you the same color picker. You can select colors and a whole bunch of other tools, and I'll quickly go through these and then you can play with them. You can again select your font, whether you want it bold or regular, etc. This is your font size. Again, you can adjust the size of your font like that. This is kerning, which is the space you get between two characters. So if I go to my text tool, and if I see two characters that are spaced weird, like let's say I wanted a little more space between the X and the T, then you can click and drag on the kerning, and if you watch closely, notice as I drag to the left, the space gets shorter. As I drag to the right, the space gets bigger. And this is something you don't want to mess with a lot, but sometimes there are instances where you get a really weird spacing, like one letter is spaced bigger than another, and it just looks wrong when you're doing graphic design. So by selecting between two characters, you can adjust the kerning. Note that if I'm selected on the entire thing, the kerning does not work, okay? Because it's looking at individual spacing between two characters. Okay, this is the vertical scale. So if I'm selected on just one letter and I change this, it's going to make that letter taller. And a better example, let's Control Z, and let's say I just want to do the first letter really big. So I select, highlight that letter, and then I click here and I'm going to increase the percentage. So if we go to 150% approximately and release, you can see that now we have a really tall letter at the beginning. You could do that with the letter at the end and kind of make like, and kind of bookend your headline. We'll do it. Let's highlight that one real quick. And you can also go in and type in percentages. So 150%, click outside of it, or I mean hit enter, and it made that one bigger too. Okay, not necessarily something I would use in this case, but you can see how to use it. Baseline shift, I won't go over. Leading is actually very useful, and I'll just give you a quick example. If we go and make 2 lines out of this by hitting the Enter key, we'll get this out of the way. Leading is the space between the 2 lines. So if we want to change the leading, the space between these 2 lines, and I go to the left, it's going to shrink up the space between the 2 lines. If I go to the right, it's going to increase the space between the 2 lines. And this can be, again, really important when you're doing graphic design, because if we leave this at the default, I'm going to hit Control Z and just click so you can see it. The spacing's not bad, but if we wanted that to be tighter, then we can just drag it up a little bit and tighten it up, and it can be really helpful. One other thing you want to be careful of is when you're doing stuff like this and it's centered, if you have extra spaces like here, you want to make sure you clean those up. Otherwise you get uneven centering. And then this one is the tracking. So let's get another selection here, and we can change the tracking. And tracking works similar to kerning, except that it's for multiple characters or a whole string of characters rather than just the space between 2. And then finally we can adjust the horizontal scale. So if we're gonna, just like the vertical scale, which is this one, or excuse me, which is this one, this is the horizontal scale. So if we reduce it, we're gonna make a skinnier letter, and if we increase it, we're gonna make a fatter letter. Again, not something you're going to use very often unless you have a really good reason for it, because you don't want to compromise the integrity of the original font, but that's the tool if you need to use it. So those are a bunch of tools for modifying your text. Of course, always remember, after you do your edits, you have to click Confirm to accept your changes. And also remember that if you're selected somewhere else, well, let's get rid of this, and you want to go in and edit your text, the quickest, easiest way is to double click on that text layer right on the icon, and then you can just click in wherever you want to edit. So what I recommend is go find an image that you want to add some text to and play around with it. And please share your image in the Q&A. I would love to see what you come up with. If you want to create a meme, funny joke laid over an image to practice for Facebook or whatever, that would be awesome. You could make my day by entertaining me a little bit while you practice. And I'll look forward to seeing you in the next lecture. We've got some more really exciting stuff coming up, so I can't wait to see you in there.